there's a lot that can be said about this, but I won't. They go with you in the cabin, and generally you, just like on the way here, I generally, and a lot of people with disabilities, get the bulkhead because there's a little more room, and airlines that are with it, and there are some that are not, usually will leave a seat next to you open so that there's more room for the dog to lie down on the floor in front of you and sort of beside you. So your seat and the seat next to you to lie down in. And but for example, at Continental, when I made the reservation, the lady on the phone asked, "So what type of service dog is it?" And I said, "Well," and I know what she was getting at, but I got to test these people, and what do you mean? What kind? Well, do they help you? Does it help you with emotionally? She was trying to lead me in that path, trying to test the legality of it. And I said, no, he helps me with. I took the easy route, and I said, no, I have physical disabilities. I could have said I have physical and psychological, but God, these people will start to mince words with, fence with you, and I even encourage. I have friends who are veterans and non-veterans, who I say, just look, you have PTSD, you don't have a physical disability. Sell him as a service dog. He helps you physically. He does. He physically helps you, right? I mean, if you get migraines, and this dog physically helps you, right? So I don't believe in the whole, letting people know your business, your disability. You have a disability, you have a disability. How does it? They can ask the two questions that Sarah articulated.
It kind of matters like where you are when you're asking the question. That's why I was breaking it down. Are you out in public? Are you? The simple answer is that most of the statutes don't have express language. You can, but a lot of them borrow the new ADA language. And in the ADA language, I have that went through the definition of service dog. The bottom line is that the dog has received training, is responding to a task that's related to the disability. The ADA, unfortunately, with the new rules, doesn't acknowledge emotional support animals. Well, under Title II or III, which would be the government facilities and public accommodations. So there's no protections there, but if you're in an employment setting and you want ADA protections, you can say this is a reasonable accommodation, and then, but the statute doesn't specifically define emotional support animals. It's just that within the community, my understanding is that I pulled a definition off of a site that said, hold on a second. I thought it was really nice, actually, so okay, emotional support animals can provide therapeutic support through companionship, non-judgmental positive regard, affection, and focus, and a focus in life. But a lot of people's pets can do that too. So, and actually I was just speaking to a woman above, a participant that was telling me that there's therapeutic, specific regulations, right, for therapeutic dogs, which I actually wasn't aware of. So I'm educating myself about it, and unfortunately there's a lot of gray area and a lot of mystery, and that's why people keep running into all these problems. But on the flip side, because it's sort of loose, you can actually make these arguments for yourself, and if you get the documentation to support it, then you have broader range to have animals that are not officially ADA service animals in a broader range of settings. I hope that answers it.
I'm just not sure what's contained companion animal is, perhaps just in the context of your case then, since there are so many different
Yeah,
contexts.
right, sure.
So what was it in that case?
Sure, and it's a good question. I think, as Sarah already has explained, part of the issue here is this is on the forefront of the law, so the answers to these questions are still being developed, so that's why sometimes it's hard to give an exact answer. But the case that I was describing, it was a fair housing case where it's not required the animal be a service dog. So we use the term companion animal as shorthand, really, for the fair housing requirement, and for a reasonable accommodation to be necessary legally, it has to provide the person with an equal opportunity to enjoy their housing. Equal opportunity to enjoy the housing, and also connected to the disability. So we use shorthand companion animal as a kind of a legal signal that that's what the dog is providing, that equal opportunity to enjoy the housing and related to the disability. So that's all packed into that term.
So
But
it sounds broader than ESA.
could be overlap, and that's why I think Sarah mentioned too, we have to be careful sometimes which term we're using, in which legal context is it. It could have a different meaning. So that's why I've got to apologize, but it's kind of complicated, but a very good question.
Actually, you're in luck if you're talking about that, because that falls under, since it's a public accommodation, it's a privately owned thing that's open to the public, that falls under the ADA Title III, which has the express definition. Well, I'm sorry, you're in luck if you have a psych service animal. If you have an emotional support animal, then it gets a little dicey. If it's an entity that receives federal funding, then you could argue under Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act that it's a reasonable accommodation, and then you have broader range to make the argument that, you know, other animals should be included.
Well, it raises the same issues. Definitely, yes. There's a different context. The breed restrictions, you know, I think I mentioned in my case, there was the big problem of public perception around certain breeds. I think weight restrictions probably raise a different set of concerns and arguments, but still subject to reasonable accommodation. And then you get into the issue of what is reasonable, and you have to look behind what's the reason for the weight restriction, and what's the basis for an exception in a particular case, and you'd apply that same law, but it would be a little different analysis, I think, than the breed restriction.
I can take that one. So if you're training your dog to work with your clients, then that would be a therapy dog and not a service dog. And just for the benefit of everyone out here, a therapy dog generally helps other people, and a service dog generally ignores other people and helps the person with the disability. And so if you wanted to train your dog as a therapy dog, there are lots of therapy organizations that you can get involved with, or you could do it on your own. And I would encourage you to do that, because I know that there are a lot of people that would be really helped by having a dog in the office that's trained to respond to people who are in distress. Or there are several. Let's see. Well, Delta Delta does not allow dogs that have been fed raw food diets, and so I don't know if you feed the raw food diet, but it's a big thing amongst the therapy dog community. There's TDI and Therapy Dogs Incorporated. Those are both other good ones. And check around, there might be a local one as well that you could become affiliated with. Just read all the restrictions, because some of them only allow you to be affiliated with one organization, others allow you to be affiliated with multiple organizations, and some have restrictions on what you can feed your dog.
I just want to add to her just one quick thing, that really want to applaud your eagerness to do that as a psychotherapist, and I believe that every hospital and every clinic, before long, as it should, will have therapy dogs on staff. And I would urge you to, in your communities, to try and help make that happen, because the work that is done to ease the suffering, to help in the therapy, is absolutely life-saving.
There are a lot. You mean one that will provide a fully trained dog, or do you mean one that will help you train your own dog?
Sure. I know various organizations like Canine Companion for Independence.
They don't do psych service dogs.
Berkeley University.
Yeah, no.
ADI is University.
There's Laughing Eyes Kennel.
What's it called?
Laughing Eyes Kennel. Laughing Eyes. In Arizona. There's several others in Arizona that, oh gosh, I'm forgetting the names of right now. But if you come up afterwards and come get my email address, I can email you with more. If you're in the Bay Area and you're looking for people to help, there's Discovery Dogs Incorporated, and they will help you train your own service dog if you go through their program. If you're a veteran, out in Fair Oaks, there's a free service dog training program that a friend of mine has gone through. I think it's called 4 Paws for Vets. Is that what it is? Yeah.
4 Paws?
Yeah, 4 Paws for Vets, and it's free for veterans training their own psych service dogs. And then in the Berkeley area, Nancy Frensley at the Berkeley East Bay Humane Society, she will help people train their own service dogs. And she's actually going to be having a class coming up soon for people.
It's in Berkeley. What's it called?
The Berkeley East Bay Humane Society. Then Nancy Frensley is the one who is to contact there.
Yeah, that's a good housing law question, and if I can't give a full answer here, I encourage you to contact Bay Area Legal Aid. But the rule in California, within about 2 weeks after you move out, the landlord has to refund your deposit. So it sounds like a type of deposit.
The Air Carriers Act, and I did a brief summary about it. It's kind of specific, and
If you want me to go, I know by heart the
Yeah,
things
sure,
that are
sure.
required and to be in the letter. So if you want to, the Air Carriers Access Act requires the same thing of emotional support animals and of psychiatric service animals traveling on the airline. So if you admit, when they ask you what kind of service animal you have, if you admit it's a psychiatric service animal, then you have to abide by those regulations, which require you to 48 hours in advance, you have to submit a letter to the airline that says that you have a mental health disability as defined in the DSM-4, that the letter has to be from a licensed mental health care professional in the state where you reside. It has to include the license number of the person prescribing the service animal. It has to be on their letterhead, and it can't be more than a year old, and it also has to say that you require the services of the animal either during transit or at the destination. So those are all the requirements, and you have to get that in 48 hours in advance to the airlines. And it's totally discriminatory, and the Psychiatric Service Dog Society has led a letter writing campaign to try to get them to change it, but so far no dice.
Could you let me know?
Actually, there is a video put
I
out.
saw the video thing on the internet, training video.
Yeah, have you seen that video?
I haven't seen it yet.
Oh, it's great. It was made by the Sacramento Police Department, and there's a training video for police members on how to handle a public access challenge situation. And there's also a video on the same site for the hotels and stuff like that. But what I usually recommend that people do when they call the police is know what statute that is being broken. And so when we call the police, then send your Penal Code 365 on your way over, and that way, you know, that they'll know it. But the videos are really good, so I recommend those.
And thank you for trying to educate
Yeah,
yourself on
thanks.
this. It's difficult. So you're asking a public accommodation can refuse entry if the quote unquote the dog is out of control. So you want to know what constitutes out of control?
In the new ADA revisions, they've defined a few things that the dog can't do, like it has to be potty trained, so it can't use a bathroom. and it can't be disruptive or destructive. And they've kind of given a pretty big leeway. They also require it to be leashed unless the dog is required to be without a leash for a disability-specific purpose. So generally speaking, I would look to a public access test and see the behaviors on a public access test. Those are generally in-control behaviors, and then there will usually be, on every public access test, there's a list of like behaviors that are disqualifying behaviors. Those would be what I think a judge would probably look at and say, that's out of control. And they're usually things like biting people, excessive barking, eliminating in the store, knocking over things, that type of thing.
It depends on a few things. What exactly the dog's doing, the person is doing that owns the aggressive dog, how I'm feeling, how Tuesday is responding. Usually, I kind of sympathize with the lady who brought up the question about the small dogs who the owners have alleged provoked biting and such, because typically small pets that growl and get defensive and scared at Tuesday's size, and they have come at him, and I will, he is very leery of, he trusts humans, he's very leery of other dogs, because, except service dogs and trained dogs, they actually know, trained dogs actually kind of know other trained dogs by their behavior and such. But pets that are, these are sort of instinctual, them altogether, and he's trained to avoid them. But I think that this is sort of relating to your question. I'm sort of perplexed in this country and even in states that pet owners are not required by law to put their dogs through obedience training, basic obedience training. I personally think that ought to happen. If you're going to take on a pet, another living creature, you ought to be required to put your dog through 6 to 8 weeks of basic obedience.
Can I just add, my first service dog had to be retired because she developed a really big fear of other dogs because she was attacked so many times. So especially like on places like the Berkeley campus, we had incidents where there were repeated attacks by the same dogs. So my response when I see a dog that I am not 100% sure about is I run into a building, or I run behind a car, or I run away from the situation, because I'm not putting my service dog's life in danger. I'm not putting his working ability in danger. Like with my first service dog, I would try to educate, but I mean, like, the dog is then continuing to try to attack my dog, and it was just really bad.
Yes, there have been other cases. It's a difficult issue. There was another case in federal court in San Francisco about 10 years ago, shortly after that terrible tragedy where a young woman was killed by a dog. And so, and I mentioned there's just a huge problem with public perception, really misperception. A lot of dogs they're misidentified, and it happens that, in the newspaper, even whenever there's a mixed breed dog involved in anything, the newspapers tend to say, well, it was a pit bull or something like a pit bull. And so there's a lot of misperception and a need for education out there. And I'd be glad I could find a couple of the other cases and get those to you.
Can I get this one? Because I feel really strongly about this, because this is, I am directly affected by poorly behaved animals like that. It is in California illegal to falsely represent a dog as a service animal. There's a $1,000 fine and or 6 months in jail. I don't know if you've heard of this. I've called the police several times on people who I know for sure are fraudulently representing animals as service animals, and the police department directs me to animal control. Animal control directs me back to the police department. There's this law. They should be fined and put in jail, but it's not really impacted. So one thing that the Psychiatric Service Dog Society has just recently developed, and it should be on our website today, is a printable flyer that you can hand out that's called The Responsibilities of a Service Dog Handler. And it goes through kind of like how to be a responsible service dog handler. You should respect everyone. You should respect your dog. You should, make sure your dog is behaving and stuff. So my advice would be to, if you have people who you think fall into that fraudulent category, maybe offer them that information about how to be a responsible service dog handler, because maybe it is a real service dog and they just don't know. And then I would try to figure out, if we can, some way to find out who to actually report to, because there's some guy on YouTube who tells people he's faking it, and he's on YouTube and he goes into a bunch of places in San Francisco, and I've gone back and forth, police to the animal control, and nobody can do anything. So I don't know if you have any.
I'll give you my number.
Thank you very much. Yeah. I really, really wish that there were more resources. There is, I forget what it's called, that provides food to low-income people who have pets. I can't remember. Yes, pause. Yeah, so that is a resource. But as to training and stuff, no, there's not really anything. There's a couple of companies that used to give out grants, but in the last few years, nobody's been really getting them. If they're a veteran, they're lucky. They can go to the 4 Paws for Vets if they can get up to Fair Oaks outside of Sacramento and have completely free training. So if they have transportation to that and are veterans, then they're very lucky and can take advantage of that. So what you want me to talk about, what we recommend, the Psych Service Dog Society recommends, or because I don't know that there are any laws about that, but we recommend that all service animals be able to work under voice control as well as with a leash. And the reason is because equipment can fail. There can be an emergency. You can forget a leash. Heck no, I've forgotten the leash sometimes, and I'm like, oh great, luckily my dog's tall enough I can hold on to a collar. The ADA does say that dogs should need to be leashed, and the California state law also says that service dogs in training have to be leashed, but we recommend that they be able to respond to off-leash controls, and we recommend that they get at least one walk every day where they get to be a dog. It's really important for our service dogs to have downtime where they get to exercise. Well, and where leashes are required, we would say you should leash them, but where leashes aren't required, then yeah.
Well, that was one of the lessons, I think, of our case. And when you look at the cases other courts have decided on these issues, almost every time the court will say, this is a very fact-specific decision. Each case has its own facts and circumstances. So that's why it's real important. I think one of the lessons we learned is to, if you can, check with other neighbors, see how they feel about it, find out what are the reasons why the landlord's saying it's a problem. Can you address those concerns and show that it's reasonable? And so, without getting into the specific facts, that's basically all I can tell you. And I recommend again that HUD DOJ memo from May 2004. It's just a great explanation of a lot of those issues.
The short answer is it's in the book. I know I could give it away, but there are other questions that probably. He loves you. Yes, absolutely. It makes it. It disturbs me. And God bless all my friends and with disabilities who have service dogs of different kinds and with different ailments and everything. But it's gotten out of control, the way, you know, people are costuming their service dogs. Okay, I mean, you know, they're pink and they're fuchsia and they're orange and they're black and there needs to be because without it, you have people who don't know. You have people at the library. You know, you have fraudulent people out there causing us in society headaches. You have the lay people who don't understand what a service dog really is because they're people who put, you know, diabetes dog on their thing instead of just a service dog, or, you know, people who put all these do not pet sign dog, you know, pet sign stickers on their things instead of having a standard leash, you know, and a standard vest with standard training. I mean, the public access test that PSDS uses is from ADI. It's from Assistance Dogs International. I mean, the problem is that all of these nonprofits are unwilling to work together, and the disabled community, you know, with attorneys and with law enforcement and with advocates and with nonprofits, that you need to come together like this and in small working groups and draft legislation at the state level to standardize certification and proper wear and display of service dog attire and such. With that, we're moving that way. It's going to happen. So we might as well do it now rather than continue to have all these issues. You know, you have service dog agencies that are forcing clients to put their label, you know, like Air Jordan, you know, on their service dog vests. You know, you have to wear this nonprofit's thing as per the contract, or else, you know what I mean? I mean, there's all kinds of ridiculous stuff going on out there. So you're absolutely right. Bureaucracies have to be developed. There is goodness in bureaucracy, believe it or not.
Can I would like to argue the counterpoint to that. I totally agree that we need to have organizations getting together and cooperating and stuff, but I don't see putting the onus on the person with the disability as the true kind of idea of ADA law. ADA is a civil rights law, and so basically I think that instead of saying we're going to put lots and lots and lots of restrictions on how your dog can help you, you know, for instance, even vests, like I know people who use different vests because they need different reasons. My vest is good for a little bit of counterbalance work. I know somebody else who has a different vest for a lot of counterbalance work. People have varied needs. My dog likes going naked, so he often works in just a bandana. That's what I call going naked. So I don't think the onus should be put on the people with the disability. I think instead what should happen, which is what I think should happen with breed-specific legislation and mandatory spay-neuter, is the onus should be put on the people who are breaking the law. There should be increased fines and penalties for breaking the law. There should be enforcement for people breaking the law, and there should be an education of business owners for what they can do, like at the library. What you think is breaking the law, who can you call, and can you get them to actually enforce the law? And I think if we did that, came at it from that perspective, that way there's no onus put on the people with the disability. The onus is put on the people who are breaking the law.